Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got the whole crew with us this week, Rusty Mansell and Kip Adams. And, fellas, I don't know how the weather is where you guys are today on this Monday. A little bit rainy here in Athens, but as crazy as it sounds, we are 9 practices through for Georgia spring ball, only 6 to go, including G-Day. And, Rusty, can you believe it that we're already past the halfway point when it comes to spring practice?
Yeah, I can imagine those kids will probably hit the wall. I mean, you're Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. It's not easy playing football at University of Georgia. I mean, Kirby doesn't sugarcoat that, and they tell the recruits they want the recruits to see practices and stuff. So, you go through a 15-game season, you end in mid-January, go through a lot emotionally, have an off season, and there's probably at that point now. And I made a note, I think yesterday on the board. To me, this is kind of the scrimmage of the spring coming up. It's the second one. I think G-Day is a little more scripted type deal. Kirby's not going to show a ton, but I think, what we see out of this coming week, this Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday practices are going to give us a really good gauge of kind of who is where and who's had what I think is kind of taking a step forward in the spring at certain positions.
Kip, what have you thought of what we've learned so far this spring and knowing that we're only a couple weeks away at this point till G-Day?
I can't say we're really surprised. I mean, Kirby's comments on quarterbacks the other day, no one should be really shocked by what he said. But at the same time, I know that, we've kind of talked about the quarterback battle is probably going to go into the fall. And when you have 3 quarterbacks on your roster as talented as Georgia has, and you have that transfer portal, there are some that might say, well, of course it's going to go into the fall. Why would he name a starter now? There is the other aspect of this is that if you kind of know if somebody's really separated themselves, you want to get them as many first team reps as you can. And again, we saw with Stetson Bennett how valuable that was for him when he was, actually known as the starter. Just that step that he was able to take that offseason, how important that is. So, these first team reps are valuable. But at the same time, the fact that, maybe Carson or Brock hasn't separated themselves, you shouldn't look at that as a negative, in my opinion. I just think right now it's really talented quarterbacks going against a really talented defense. It's going to be hard for one of these guys just to light the world on fire compared to the other guys. So, it's kind of status quo, which is to say that you got guys that are just battling it out. And I think, that's one of those things that we're all going to watch that on April 15th and make our snap judgments there and overreact to all of that. But I think that it's probably what Kirby wants these guys to continue to compete and to know that they're probably going to continue to compete this fall.
So the majority of today's episode, we're going to talk about what we learned and what we've heard about Georgia's first scrimmage, which was last Saturday, first of 3 scrimmages, including G-Day. And I'll start with you, Rusty. You had some really good notes, really good nuggets on our board about things you'd heard, things we have learned from that scrimmage. What were your biggest takeaways from what you've heard, what some of those Bulldogs were able to do in that first scrimmage? You're muted, Rusty.
I think Georgia fans know what they have in Brock Bowers, and you're not hearing his name much because he's probably they're protecting him a little bit, cruise control. But you look at Lawson Lucky, a freshman who just got here in January, and from all purposes, we're hearing he had 3 touchdowns on Saturday and from multiple quarterbacks. So that tells you that they like him, they trust him already. He's a guy. And that's good with Oscar Delp as well, a proven guy from last year. So I think the tight end room continues to be a strength for Todd Hartley. I think, the quarterback play is critiqued so much, and under a new offensive coordinator, kind of finding out where everybody is with this deal, what you do the best, what Bobo likes out of each one of these guys. So were there some interceptions? Yes, there were some interceptions thrown on Saturday, but that's not panic time. You do like that I was told Javon Bullard basically come across the field on a zone play, snagged one in the middle of the field and took it to the house. And Malachi Starks, who was freshman All-American last year, he had a pick, and Dalen Everett had a pick. So you like to hear those kind of, creating turnovers from the defensive side. But the last thing I'll mention is, Georgia is dangerously thin at running back. So when they go Branson Robinson and, say Dejon Edwards on one team, you got Roderick Robinson and some walk-ons on the other ones. But you look at Roderick Robinson, the freshman out of San Diego, again, 235 pound, 238 pound, somewhere in that range, running back. And I talked to two people that were at that scrimmage on Saturday, and both people were like, man, that number 0. And I'm like, that's Roderick Robinson. They're like, that guy is just toting people. Like, he is dragging people around. He's moving the chains. One guy told me, he goes, look, he gets the ball, he falls for 4 yards. So, in this league where first downs are a premium, the ability to run the football and to move the chains in a game and the SEC on Saturdays is the most important thing, to extend drives. You don't get a ton of chunk plays. You've got to be able to extend drives. And they're adding a freshman, man, and from what I've told, man, he carries that weight really good. I mean, that's what he's going to play. He's going to play in that 230, 235 pound frame, and he's carrying it well.
Yeah, Kendall Milton joked with us at the start of spring and said that he's been warning Rod that they're going to move him to fullback if he ain't careful. But it sounds like he's carrying that weight well and playing well. And I wanted to talk about, because I went and looked up this quote talking about the quarterbacks. Everybody, we're going to analyze everything, and you can bet after G-Day we're going to be breaking down every throw and saying what was good and what was bad. But when it comes to Brock Vandergriff, when we talked to Kendall Milton, who I just mentioned, he talked about his legs and his ability to move around in the pocket. And I went back the day after the national championship. Kirby was asked about, having Coach Stetson, does anything about having Coach Stetson change the way you evaluate quarterbacks? And the thing that Kirby said was, I maybe put a little bit more weight into mobility. So that sort of, when it comes to Brock, is really interesting to me. I can't help but think back to that quote because, it seems like just based on everything we've heard and seen that Brock is doing his part to stay right there with Carson. And, like we've said, this looks like a competition that's not going to be done anytime soon.
Also, doesn't get mentioned enough, but I heard Gunnar Stockton had 2 really good runs that were not designed runs, that he was kind of off platform. So, he's another guy with a big arm. He's not the biggest dude. He's probably 6 foot, but he definitely has the legs to hurt you. I've watched him do that. He has really thick lower body as a quarterback. So, running's a big part of his game. And we didn't really talk a lot about him, but when he got his chance on Saturday, a couple throws, and I think he had a 10-yard touchdown pass, and then he had a couple of chunk plays running the ball.
Yeah, no doubt that they've got talent, honestly, in all 3 of those quarterbacks. Wanted to just talk about some of the other things. We got a chance to talk to Kirby. That's the first time we've talked to Kirby since Pro Day, and that's been, a little bit less than a month. So good getting a little insight from Kirby, talking about the scrimmage as a whole. He said it's a lot like he's seen in his previous 7 years at Georgia. That first scrimmage, a little rough. Said it was a little more lackadaisical than he would have wanted, maybe some more penalties than he's used to in that first scrimmage. But he talked about a lot of different positions. We had a chance to pick his brain on a few different spots. I asked him about outside linebacker because that's
Gordon, how long you cover Kirby? Not interrupt. How long you cover Kirby?
So I had 1 year. So this is my 3rd year, I guess.
I can go ahead and tell you how these spring press conferences going to go. And that dude's not going to walk in here and go, damn, I'm so proud. I'm so happy. We're way ahead of the sticks. This is not going to happen with him. I heard so much reaction from people. And I'm sure you see it in your mentions, like panic mode and all that kind of stuff. Look, Kirby Smart, that's not the way. He's always going to find a way. Hell, he had this team thinking they were underdogs all year last year. I mean, they were number 1 from wire to wire, and somehow they thought people were saying they were going to go 7-5. So kudos to Kirby Smart.
Yeah, Kip and I can both attest to this. We got a message from somebody about a quote from what Kirby said, not happy with practice. And we were like, stand down. This is not a big deal.
Yeah.
But some of the things he talked about outside linebacker, obviously they were already in an interesting spot, losing Nolan Smith and Robert Bill. And then you have Jalen Walker and Marvin Jones Jr. having surgery beforehand. And Kirby described it as green as he's ever seen that position, just because there's so much inexperience, really practically no experience besides Chaz Chambliss. So I thought that was interesting. Cornerback battle, he listed, I think, 5 different names, the guys that are competing there. Dalen Everett, who I think Rusty mentioned earlier, had a pick in that scrimmage on Saturday. Nyland Green, Julian Humphrey. I also mentioned Smoke Bowie and A.J. Harris among those guys fighting there. Running back, he talked about Branson Robinson, the progress he's made. And he's somebody that I'm really interested to follow once really we get into the season, just to see what kind of role he has. A lot of really interesting nuggets, I thought, for Kirby being, a little bit guarded, which all the coaches are, especially when it comes to spring ball and having a lot of work left to do. Thought he gave us a lot of really good information, talked about the transfers as well, and some of the stuff that they've seen from those guys to this point. Kip, anything of note or anything that really drew your attention from what Kirby had to say Saturday, and just really where this team is as a whole as we got 6 practices to go?
Yeah, I think we, just the fact that they might be moving, Javon Bullard around, his versatility in the secondary, the fact that he compared him to Chris Smith, a guy that, played a little bit the first 2 years, but then kind of came into his own as a playmaker and left as an All-American. And so, the one thing we knew about Javon Bullard early on is, he's not afraid to light you up, to lower that shoulder and deliver a big hit, which honestly, Chris Smith, even though, we knew at the combine he wasn't going to measure in big and, the size there isn't going to, blow anyone away, but he was not afraid either. He would lower that shoulder and tackle anyone in front of him. And that's the mentality that Javon Bullard came in with, just a football player, a guy that is willing to do whatever it is, do the dirty work, can make plays as well. But it's just a guy that's fearless. Whatever you ask him to do, he's just going to do it. And those are the kind of players that, Kirby Smart loves those kind of guys. And he probably sees a little bit of himself in there as well, but just a guy that is going to be asked now with Chris Smith gone to be more of a playmaker. And so whether that's at safety or whether that's at the star position, I just think it's really intriguing now that they're kind of giving him an opportunity to see if he can be versatile enough for them, because they're not sure who the other safety is going to be. You got Malachi Starks there, who had a breakout freshman season, but, is Dan Jackson going to be the other safety there? Are you going to have, Joel Aguero coming in as a true freshman and being that guy? Are you going to, is Tyke Smith now healthy enough to, the transfer from West Virginia to really step into a starting position? You're not sure which one of those guys is going to be the other guys. You might have to use multiple guys depending on what look you want, or, you might have to move, Bullard around, from game to game. So this spring's really big for him as they try to get him in different positions, see how comfortable he is out there. And I think that so far it sounds like he's doing a really good job out there. I think he's one of those guys, huge stock up, but already, coming off a big season, especially late last year, the big plays he made. I think it's really got to be reassuring for them that, he is starting to really, really shine regardless of where they line him up out there.
Defensive MVP of both playoff victories for Georgia. Rusty, any thoughts on Javon and what kind of seems like a good problem to have for Georgia when it comes to figuring out where he fits best?
Yeah, obviously a player like that, in that defense, I think Kip hit it on the spot there with Chris Smith. If you're going to play for Kirby Smart, you got to be able to play against the run. You got to be able to fit the box. That's just you just cannot play any type of safety position and kind of be hesitant under what, Georgia kind of commands. And Javon Bullard, number one, can cover, and we've seen him do that. And number two, he's physical. And number three, he's a really good tackler. So, wherever you line him up, you got to get the most use out of him. They blitz him too as well. So you look at Javon Bullard and I got to thinking about the summer and some of the names that you're going to start hearing a lot about. Obviously, Michael Williams when he gets back, and Brock Bowers and Marius Mims. But as the quote unquote, like the national media starts digging into Georgia a little bit, as we approach kind of like SEC media days, which jump starts, I think Javon Bullard is going to be one of those guys. And I would not be surprised if Kirby Smart doesn't send him to SEC media days as one of the guys, probably with Brock Bowers, but as two. And that's, guessing at this point. But, Bull, as he's known to that team, carries a lot of weight in the locker room. And so far he's continuing to do what he did during the offseason, during the late in the season, is make plays.
Bullard, Bowers, and I would put my money on maybe like Cedric Van Pran. That feels like a trio.
I think Van Pran for sure. So I would love for Tate to go with that mullet, just to, he's got that Nashville look, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yes, to be decided, no doubt about it. Well, we'll take a quick break and then just wrap this episode up, just talking about what we want to see, what's left of spring, and obviously ending with G-Day. Welcome back, everybody. Well, at this point, we got 6 practices to go. Tuesday will be the next one for Georgia, and then obviously that's going to culminate with G-Day on Saturday, April 15th. And Rusty, I thought you made a really good point earlier about this next scrimmage on Saturday, the fact that, they're probably not going to want to show us a ton, and especially all the fans, everybody who's going to be watching at G-Day. But when it comes to this next scrimmage, and also just with what's left of spring, what interests you the most? What are you really keeping an eye on when it comes to this team?
Well, the most important thing is no news is good news on the injury front. You want to get through spring. You don't want to have any kind of things go on. You want to be to kind of finish. But, I don't know. I want to see it's been kind of quiet from my end, kind of on the wide receiver front. Like who else is taking that step with long, is Dylan Bell that guy? I think Ra Thomas is starting to get into a little more comfortable in the Georgia Bulldog way. When I say they practice hard at University of Georgia, they practice hard. I don't care who you are and where you came from. There's a standard at Georgia. I think he's learning that. And I think, I'm interested in how he comes on. I'm hearing he's doing well. Dominic Lovett's a guy, obviously. So, wide receiver wise, you want to see Yazid Haynes is a guy that we mentioned had, a little bit of buzz on Saturday. He's a freshman out of the Philly area. So I think you just want to see these guys, let's see some explosive plays and see if we can hear that. I did hear that last Thursday that Carson Beck had 2 really good long balls to Ladd McConkey, I believe was 1. So, you look at these guys and, explosive plays, who's those guys that kind of are starting? We all have put so much focus on the quarterbacks. At the end of the day, they got to have targets. Can these guys separate and those types of things? So really my focus this week is kind of what we're hearing on the wide receiver race, going into what I think is probably, again, the most important scrimmage of the spring, which will be this Saturday in Sanford Stadium.
Mentioning Ra Thomas, I thought it was interesting that Kirby pointed out that he's got an ability to make plays downfield. And, that was something that Kirby emphasized. So watching him and really the rest of that group, and they are so deep at receiver. I think Kirby mentioned that when he was talking about the quarterbacks that, with a guy like Gunnar Stockton, who's running with a lot of the threes, he's working with some pretty talented receivers, I should say,
Yep.
At the threes, which Kirby said, compared to the past, that's not always the case. They are so deep at receiver.
Yeah, those transfers. And then you got some guys that came back. Obviously, Ladd come back. I don't think people realize how close, and I didn't really know this until we got to L.A., how close Ladd McConkey was to leaving. Like, I would be willing to say that going into L.A. that I think he was leaning on leaving and then winds up staying. So that kind of caught me off guard. But, you got a guy like that come back, and he's more healthy now. Obviously didn't finish the year healthy, but it's funny. We sit here and, me and Kip have dealt with the board. And, when you write a Ladd McConkey commitment, that doesn't really get the juice, you know what I mean? And when you write a story that Ladd McConkey's coming back, and basically the whole board's a group hugging, it's kind of life comes full circle at you.
My favorite thing is seeing that old board post get bumped every once in a while.
The Stetson Bennett one, Kip would dig in there and the comments for about the first hour on that Stetson Bennett commitment they're so pissed. Like, that was the Aubrey Solomon year, and they're like, we're taking this guy over a 5-star D lineman, and at the end of the day, this guy left Georgia with 2 national championships. So you just never know.
I think they thought it might be Trey Sanders. Remember, they're like, they're getting Trey Sanders. It's the internet. The internet always keeps receipts, and I think between Ladd and Stetson, there's been plenty of opportunities for those the last couple of years.
I think at one point they had talked themselves into Garrison Hurst coming back for one last year at one point. So I knew it kind of got out of control once I got home, and Kip had texted me like, "Oh boy, have you seen this thread?" And I'm like, "They're about to get him." So when he committed about an hour later, it really got good.
You just never know. There's no doubt about that. Kippa, what's left of spring? What are you looking for? What intrigues you the most, and the things you're going to be keeping an eye on?
Well, I hate to keep it at the same position, but I've had my eye on a couple other guys. I think, we talk about breakout players and we talk about newcomers. It's always the freshmen or maybe the redshirt freshmen. And now this year with the transfers, it's you want to see new faces because, these are the guys that are usually most exciting to fans. The backups, quarterback's always the most popular player, and the incoming freshmen and transfers. But the one thing that Kirby Smart's kind of established is the culture of his program is that he's making sure his players buy into you might not play year one. And you might, he talks about how important special teams are because that's the developing ground for his players. And so you get some of these, so-called old men on campus that are forgotten. And, guys like Nazir Stackhouse last year, not, playing behind a bunch of NFL guys and then getting his chance. And now, he's set up for a contract year, So for me, the breakout year might be for some of these older guys. And, one of them, we've been talking about it just kind of like with James Cook those first couple of years. It was always the thought of him was greater than what you never really got to see what he could do until that last year, which, again, had one of the best all-around performances from a running back, in the SEC the last couple of years. Well, Arian Smith's one of those guys. Can he stay healthy? Because what he physically brings to the table is something that they don't have from anyone in that wide receiver room. It's that combination of just his explosiveness, that outstanding track speed. But he's an outstanding receiver as well. Great body control, and you saw a little bit about that at the pro day. He had some impressive catches out there. Where you're like, okay, yeah, we're forgetting about him because this room is so deep now, and he hasn't been able to really consistently stay on the field. Well, again, if he can do that, he can play a big role in this offense and, again, give them something they don't have. And then kind of staying with that, Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, again at pro day, making outstanding catches like, oh, yeah, I forgot. He might have the strongest hands on the team, and A.D. Mitchell's, gone to Texas. What are they going to do with that receiver position? Everyone's kind of penciled in Ra Thomas. He's got that size. He's done it at Mississippi State. Okay, but Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint is a guy that I think is really set up for a breakout season. He's put in the time. He's already earned their trust as far as being a blocker. He's got outstanding hands. It did seem like every time he made a catch last season and the season before he got hurt, it was a big-time catch, back of the end zone type guy, across the middle of the field, fearless. I think he has a chance to take that next step, be a more dynamic threat. Can he get consistent separation in the SEC? That will be the question. But I still think overall, I think he's set up for a big year for Georgia. I think those are two of the older guys in that wide receiver room that you don't want to forget about. And maybe on G-Day, they might remind you, hey, we're still here and we're set up for big things at Georgia.
And mentioning Arian Smith, if you remember last G-Day, he kind of re-emerged with that 60-yard catch from Carson Beck. And I just want to read a quote he had. We talked to him last week and asked him about the Peach Bowl, having that touchdown. And he said it meant a lot. And then he said, I'm sure y'all enjoyed it as much as I did, just with a big smile on his face. But great quote. He was a great interview that day. I think the only other position I would throw out there, and one that I wrote about on Monday morning, is just left tackle. And it's just, to me, having Austin Blasky, Ernest Green, two very different players, but the potential for either one of those, just see what they're able to do, especially to see them at G-Day. And, even what we might see as far as the lineup on G-Day with who's running with the red team, who's running with the black team, might not necessarily tell us everything, but I'm really intrigued just because those guys are two very different guys, just to see what we can find out about those guys and how they're able to perform by the time we get to G-Day.
I think they run out Austin at first team left tackle, and then on the other team, he's playing backup center?
You just let him do everything. He may be up in the stands selling popcorn. It sounds like he's a guy that can move around and do a little bit of everything. Well, on that note, I think we're going to wrap up this episode. Appreciate everybody who tuned in and checked us out. Be sure to keep an eye out this week. We'll have the info from Tuesday and Thursday when we get a chance to talk to some players. And then keep an eye out on Saturday. We're going to do our best to get some notes together from this second scrimmage. As Rusty mentioned, a very important scrimmage as we get closer and closer to G-Day. So we're going to wrap up the episode here for Kip Adams and Rusty Mansell. I'm Jordan Hill. Appreciate everybody who tuned in and checked this out. And until next time, take care.